Welcome to Launch Code, a premier business podcast, starring Evan Hafer, Matt Best, and Jared Taylor.
All right. Well, welcome to the Launch Code podcast. Today, we've got a very special guest. Baker Leavitt is going to sit here with me. He actually got Bruce to come on the show, so I want you to do an intro for Bruce, and then Bruce, if you'll give us like the 2-minute bio, that'd be great. So Baker.
So Bruce Pettit, he is the president and CEO of Leupold, which is a company based in Portland, Oregon. It's family owned and operated, and they make scopes, binoculars, red dots, spotting scopes. Phenomenal optics company, and I have been using Leupold products for as long as I've been hunting. So, Bruce, thanks for coming on the show, man. It's a pleasure to have you, and like Evan said, let's get a little 2-minute bio on you.
Yep.
Well, thanks for having me, you guys. Before I start, I just want to say, Evan, I'm really impressed with what you've done with Black Rifle Coffee. I'm officially a coffee achiever.
Nice.
So, but my father was actually in the coffee business.
Seriously?
Many years ago, and so it was. I followed you guys and watched what you've done and how you've built the brand, and I just want to congratulate you. You've done a terrific job. So keep it up, man.
Thanks, man.
It's good stuff. A little bio with me. So I've been with Leupold and Stevens. Well, first let's talk about Leupold a little bit. We're a 5th generation family owned business.
Wow.
We've been making rifle scopes in Portland, Oregon for 71 years. And, had some pretty incredible innovations and so forth over the time. And, we invented the duplex reticle, for example.
Right.
And we employ about 700 employees here in Beaverton. And we make rifle scopes 7 days a week. If you're going to, any optic that you're going to put on any weapon, and look through it and pull the trigger, it has to come out of this factory. And that's something that is, innately unique to us. No one else does anything like that. So we're truly a family owned, uniquely American company that is proud of what we do.
So Bruce, so before Leupold, I'd love to know, because I'd love to unpack Leupold a little bit more, Leupold and Stevens a little bit more, but how did you end up at Leupold? Where did your journey start in this? Because I know, reading a little bit about you, you started a business early on in life, and then kind of show us or unpack your journey a little bit.
Yeah, how'd you become CEO of Leupold? What steps did you take?
Well, it was a long journey. I mean, to kind of give you a little bit of a quick background. So I originally started in the sporting goods industry. It's just, I grew up an athlete, and it's just what I wanted to do. I wanted to be in this industry, and so I got a job out of college and started off as a sales rep on the road, and eventually, over a few years, started my own sales and marketing agency with a partner, and had some success there in Western states, representing different brands in both sales and marketing. And then from there, I actually made a change. I sold the business and decided that I wanted to be more on the setting strategy side. And so I decided to go work for a company called Brooks Sports, which makes running shoes.
Yeah.
In Seattle, Washington. And so I took job as VP of Global Sales and Marketing in that company, and eventually became the CEO there. And from there, it really, I had a couple of other opportunities. We had really great success at Brooks. I eventually was recruited to leave there and go to another company, which was in the action sports industry, called Airwalk, and was a bit of a turnaround. And worked on that. Eventually, got a group together, and we bought that brand with private equity, and ended up acquiring some other brands, and eventually selling that business, which was called Collective International.
So basically, I've been giving you money my entire life. Brooks, Airwalk, Leupold.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. And so, it's just, I've always been involved with, performance brands, and after 14 years at Collective, we went through a transaction, and I had a clause in my contract that at that point I was able to essentially get all of my equity out, and I just felt like it was time then. And interestingly enough, while I have various sports that I participated in and enjoy doing, my passion is hunting. It is, I absolutely love to hunt. I grew up hunting with, as a young kid, and it's just been something I've always done. And I was just finishing up at my previous company, and I saw an ad literally in sporting goods business, and it said that Leupold and Stevens was looking for a CEO. I didn't get called or anything, and I thought, I was living in Denver, Colorado at the time, which was a great place. I love Colorado. I can consider that my home state, but I said, this is, I have a bunch of Leupold rifle scopes in my safe, and I'm gonna throw my resume in and see what happens.
So you saw an ad for CEO in a magazine, and you said,
Exactly.
"Hey guys,
That's awesome.
that's the best thing I've ever heard on this podcast."
I answered the classified ad.
Yeah. So anybody listening, take note of that.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's unbelievable.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah, honestly, you guys, I did it because I was passionate about hunting, and I knew it was a great brand.
Right.
And I'd lived in the Northwest before, and so knowing it was in Beaverton, Oregon, I'm like, I love the Northwest. It's a great place too. And so I said, what the heck? I'm gonna give it a shot, and we went through this rigorous process, and there was like 32. They got it narrowed down to 30 some, and then narrowed down to 12, and then 8, and then 6, and then and then eventually 2, and for then they eventually offered me the job. And so it was an awesome thing to go through. And what I fell in love with was this family-owned business, because I had always worked for either myself or some private equity, things like that, and even in a public company at one point. And this business just had such heritage to it, and such a great group of shareholders that I was like, I've got to do this. So I made the move, and we've been I've been doing it for just about 5 years now.
I'm going to tell you why I am a Leupold loyalist. So when I grew up in Georgia, in Savannah, Georgia, and back then, if you had a Leupold optic, like you had put some money into it.
Yeah,
like, you were of means.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I had some money, I bought my first. I remember I bought a pair of Cascades. It was maybe 9x42s or something like that, and one of the eyepieces had stripped out, and I sent an email, or I called in, and I was like, "Hey, I've got one of the eyepieces is stripped. Like, is there any way I bought these things 12 years ago. Is there any way I could maybe send them in? You guys could take a look." They're like, "Yeah, sure, send them in." So I sent them in. 3 days later, I had a package on my doorstep. It was a brand new pair of binos, and ever since that happened, I've been a Leupold loyalist. Just because it's like, wow, I was hoping maybe they might be able to fix it.
Right.
Next thing I know, like literally, I was living in Seattle. Like 2-3 days later, I had a brand new pair of binos. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, it's when we developed the gold ring, which is clearly an iconic thing in our industry, right? Marcus Leupold, who was the son of the founder, Fred Leupold. At that time, he came up with this. It's a really cool story because Marcus had gone to the engineering team, and he said, "Hey, he'd been making. He actually began making rifle scopes because his scope fogged up that he was using. He was hunting a black-tailed buck, scope fogged up, and they were an engineering company at the time and kind of doing water measurements devices and things like that his dad had founded. And he just goes, I can do this better. So the guy starts, working in mornings and nights and trying to figure this scope thing out, and eventually does it. And it catches on. It's a real it starts to become a real business. And down the line, a few years later, Marcus goes to the engineering team, and now they're rolling. People know the Leupold rifle scope, and they're running ads. And he says, I'm going to put a gold ring on our rifle scopes. And what that's going to signify is we guarantee it for life. And the engineers go, that's the stupidest thing we've ever heard of. No one, true. I got this directly from one of our old timers, and he goes, we told him we thought that was the stupidest thing, that no one would ever buy a rifle scope with a gold ring on.
Right.
Right. And he was brilliant. And so now people look at that and they see that gold ring, and just what you experienced. It means that, hey, we guarantee a lifetime of performance. And that's one of the things that we love is, we get the stories all the time about, our rifle scopes being in tough spots, whether
Right.
it's what we do on a military side of the business, or that guy waits forever to get that, elk tag in the backcountry, and something goes bad and our scope's still true, and that's a really important thing to us. So I appreciate that feedback, because we take a lot of pride in our customer service.
And I think that's something that translates through not only when you're trying to do external communication with your company. I remember growing up, and I grew up in the northern Idaho in the Panhandle area. Everybody in my family hunted, and that is such an iconic brand. It's such an iconic gold ring that even your customers, and I remember as a kid listening to stories about high quality scopes, and they're almost legendary when you really,
for sure, yeah.
when you really pin it down. And I grew up in a family of woodsmen, lumberjacks and timber harvesters, and they were guys that packed saws and drove Peterbilts, and they were guys that actually understood mechanics and the utility of having really good gear. So when you spent more with something, it actually meant something, and that translates through generations, because as a kid you're growing up and it's this mythical, like Baker was saying, when I first bought my very first Leupold optic wasn't a scope. It was your Delta point. And prior to that point, the scopes that I had were scopes that were actually handed down to me from either my dad or my grandfather, and I'd put on rifles, or the military had issued me, so I would use them on a rifle. And most of those were not highly magnified, because I was more of a close quarters guy. But my first optic was a Delta point, and the same thing. I returned that to you guys probably 7 times, because it was your first gen, and there's a few issues to work out with it, but never once did I have any form of negative interaction with customer service. It was, this is the issue I'm having. Got it. Send it back. Got it. Send it back. Replace. Now the eventuality was, you finally got not finally, but I finally got one where the bugs had been worked out. And that was your first gen of real pistol optics. But I was ripping through that thing in a way that was, you're probably not meant to use it that hard.
In your former job?
Yeah, my former job.
Well, I mean, I would imagine.
You're not meant to use it that hard.
I would imagine that you'd put it through spaces. Because Andy Stump, I remember when Andy Stump got into hunting. Andy Stump was a good friend of ours. He's in DevGru. And I was like, what do you think about, he was asking me about optics. Like, yeah, dude, Leupold's the way to go. He's like, oh, yeah, man. He's like, that's the only, he was a sniper, SEAL Team 6 sniper.
Yeah.
He was like, yeah, that's all I ever used, man. He's like, I did a lot of work with those things. I was like, oh, I'm sure they'd like to hear about that.
Yeah,
Well, we've got the Delta Point Pro for you now, so that thing is almost indestructible. So
I've actually heard that. Kyle Lamb is when he works with you guys, I believe, on a lot of different things, and Kyle told me that it's virtually indestructible. That he is.
Yeah, Kyle was actually instrumental in a lot of the product that the innovation that we put into that. And it's it's a tricky optic. Because of what it is, to get that to have field of view that you want, and at the same time have the durability that's required. But it's a Delta Point Pro for a reason. So we've put a lot of time and energy into that, and it's we continue to on our close quarters optics, we continue to make some incredible strides on what we're doing, because our commitment is what it is. We're going to make it here, and it's not just going off the shelf in Asia. We're going to make the product here. So
I think, if I'm not mistaken, I have a Delta Pro on my Kimber Super Yagar, my pistol.
Yeah,
you
do.
I do. Yeah,
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's a great one.
So with that, as far as, and that is, it's a super complex. Now that's the funny thing is when you guys first fielded those, I was like, man, this is a tough optic to make. It really is. And I understood that. And I also understood that I was putting it through the paces of not a normal wear and tear guy, a guy that's going to shoot it a lot. I was putting probably 1,000 rounds a week through that pistol. And not only that, but I was, running lights and comps and suppressors and putting it through CQB, reholster, holster, 100 times a day, just beating the living crap out of it. So I gave it a significant grade because of just the wear and tear I was putting on it. But it's neither here nor there. I think, how long have you been with Leupold?
5 years.
So here's an interesting question. The average tenure of a CEO is what, 5 years? So what have you been able to do in 5 years that you've been really proud of at Leupold?
The challenge was there's always a challenge when you have a company that's it's a 112-year-old company.
Yeah.
And we've been doing the things, 70 years we've been making rifle scopes. And,
Right.
and so the challenge you face is, how do you can't keep doing the same thing. And if you see companies out there that thought at one point they would never, be out of the mix, and you look and they're gone. Right.
Right.
And so it's critical that, you continue to evolve the culture, take what's great from your past. We have an incredible family culture as an example.
Right.
I mean, literally, it's not just family ownership. We have family members that are employees that have cousins and that kind of company. You can come in here and literally, you can have a husband and wife working in here. You can have, cousins, niece, nephew. And so that's a great thing. And there's really good advantages to that. But at the same time, you got to blend that with a high performance culture,
Right.
which is a culture that gets it done. Because guess what? Last time I counted, there was 54 optics companies out there making at least 6 rifle scopes.
Right.
So I know how big the business isn't big enough to even handle all that, know? And so you got a lot of competition, particularly with the growth that's gone on in the industry during, the Obama years.
Yeah.
It really was critical that we stepped up our game on every level. So not only culturally and getting to blending this family culture with high performance and what we want to do, but new product. I mean, you look at the new product innovation in particularly the last 4 years, and it's pretty awesome. We're going to win. We won the Guns and Ammo PX5, which is typically more of a hunting scope, and we just won the NRA award for best optic for the Mark V,
Right.
which is a phenomenal new scope. It's actually, we're trying to keep up with demand on it in terms of what it does. And so all those things, when you're talking about developing that and designing that yourself, that all takes years. It's not months.
Yeah.
It's literally because, take a Mark V and there's 200 parts in that. We make them in this factory, we put it together, we guarantee it for life. And it has to be absolutely incredibly durable and have amazing precision. Mm-hmm. And so we've gone through over that period of time, and really what I would say is kind of taking everything to the next level, which is our product line. If you look at our marketing now and what we're doing, I think when I got here, our average age of the consumer that visited our site, I'm not afraid to tell you, it was 50 years old.
Yeah.
I'm 53. Yeah. So it was me, right? And the reality is now it's our largest group is 28 to 35.
Yeah.
That's a major transformation. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so we had to move from, a company that was kind of resting on its laurels to a company that was, firing on all cylinders across the board. And we've been able to do that. And so we're going to have a good year this year. And a lot of it comes from the hard work of the team that we have and willing to make some of the tough choices to get where we need to be.
Let me ask you this. So you were a CEO twice prior to being CEO of Leupold?
That's correct. Yeah.
Any mistakes in your 5 years? Things that you would go back and do differently? And then let me ask you. So it's 2 questions. What's some of your mistakes that you've made, and what would you consider some of your bigger successes?
I think from the mistake side, there's a lot more of those. I feel like, in all honesty, because you just learn, And when I got my first CEO job at Brooks, honestly, young guy, and had a lot of success. And at that time I kind of said, okay, I'm going to do this, and I wanted to do it. But I was pretty aggressive in terms of always pushing it to another level, and I think that what I found is sometimes I would kind of get too far out in front, and you got to make sure that your team is, thoughtfully there with you. And so, I made some mistakes early on. I'm being probably too aggressive, and as opposed to maybe being more thoughtful. And what that allowed me, what that made me do is really what I enjoy most is the strategy side of the business, which is really getting into how are we going to win.
Right.
We got 54 competitors. How are we going to win? And so I really took a lot of time after that to spend time really kind of, strategy is both science and art. And it's one of those things that there isn't a ton written about it. There's some things that, other than Michael Porter, there's a stuff kind of written around about it, but really getting into how do you build a great strategic architecture, and how do you make sure that you give it the time and look at building it long-term. And so, I think that was clearly it. I think, I probably made some acquisitions that, were challenged, that I, maybe didn't look at the right way, honestly. And I tried to get better at that. And the way I look at it is, you know what, I don't fail. I just make some mistakes and I learn from them, and I move on. And now after, doing this a long time, hopefully I won't make the same mistakes again. So it's constant. I learn stuff every day, though. It's just part of the deal.
Well, these are big companies too. I think that's, from my perspective, my company is so much smaller. We're 135 people. How big was Brooks when you took that over?
Probably total sales at that time was it was plus 100 million when you took the global sales. But it was highly competitive market, which I've had the one thing I will tell you that I learned a ton from is competing against Nike.
Yeah,
because they're good.
Yeah.
I mean, they're really, really good at what they do, and I've kind of been friends with some folks over there over time, and just watched them, and they're competitive. I mean, they want to drive everyone into the ground that competes with them, and I've tried to take that as far as the positives. I tried to take that with me, wherever I've gone. I mean, here we have one of our core values is defend your ground.
Right.
That's a core value we have here, and it didn't exist before. We were kind of this nice company. And we've really changed to a much more competitive environment, which is, what, we got 700 people here we got to take care of,
right? And
we got to make sure that every day we're defending our ground, and we're aggressive at what we do. And so, that's I think, part of it is just, you continue to kind of learn from your experiences and go from there. But Collective was great. I was there 14 years, and it was a great experience. And so I've been pretty lucky. I haven't had a ton of jobs, and I've been in places that I've really enjoyed. I've never had a situation where I said, man, I hate this. I've always been pretty blessed with that, and been able to surround myself with really talented people that make me look a lot better than I really am.
And how's that relationship work when, coming from, is Brooks private or public?
I think they're owned by Berkshire Hathaway now.
Got it.
I think they're owned by Buffett.
Okay. Because that's a really interesting dynamic that I think a lot of people don't look at, starting a business, and then when they go outside and seek capital investment, whatever it looks like, right? So capital partner, and then you have this interesting blend of working for me on the board, and then also as a CEO of the company. Something I've had to learn in the last 4 years. It's a challenge even navigating two parts, right? So, you're looking at your board, you want good directive, you want good board members, then looking at your company and how do I implement those objectives, wear two hats. So have you found that a challenge as far as working for, and not a challenge, I should say, but has it been a good experience for you at Leupold working for the family? And I would imagine they have a board, and then you working as a CEO.
Yeah, it's that's probably one of those other learnings over the years is I think that really making sure that you've got people on your board that you trust
Right.
and that can add value and add great counsel, and then more importantly listen to the counsel. Right? Because early on I probably was like, yeah, hey, I know what I'm doing, leave me alone. And in reality, what I've learned now is you get smart people around you and you listen to their counsel. And sometimes you may not agree with them. Sometimes you got to make that call as a CEO to say, hey, this is the direction we're going, and that's what you pay me to do.
Right.
But what I've found, and particularly with our board here, is we've got some really talented board members. We have actually our board's made up of 4 family members that are family shareholders. We have 4 independent board members, and then myself. And it's a great dynamic. It's a great dynamic because it's an incredibly diverse board that brings some real experience. And for me, it's just, getting counsel from them and managing that. There are times, like there is with any board, where you're like, man, I wish they'd just kind of leave me alone a little bit. But with this one, it's just what happens. But with this one, it's been better than any I've ever experienced at really, giving me the tools to do the job. And the cool thing about if you look at what we want to do and it's about creating long-term value here. And that was what really probably above all attracted me. Even though I'm a hunter and I love it and I love the product and I'm into it, the reality is when I found out, it was like the first thing they said to me was, hey, you know what? And this comes from our board members that are on our board. It was like, listen, we're about creating long-term generational value. And public companies don't get that.
That has to be very rewarding to hear that, because most, when you look at outside capital comes in, VC, private equity or whatnot, they're looking for a return. Like, how fast can we make, we put in X, how fast can we make our money back plus our profit, and what's our profit? That has to be very, very, very rewarding to hear that.
Yeah, I mean, at Collective, we sold the company 3 times during that 14-year period.
Wow.
We trained, and I was always involved and always kind of leading it and doing it. But there was 3 transactions during that 14-year period. And so, the reality of being able to come in as a CEO and go, you know what, we're going to focus on a long-term strategy. We have our strategic plan all the way out to 2026.
Right.
And we call it, dominate by 2026 is what we want to do. And so we continue to build that out and look at long term. And I will tell you, it's not always easy, and particularly when business gets tough. But we've continued to make investments in what we do as an American manufacturer. I mean, we own the land here, we own the building, we own all the equipment. We have almost no debt. It's really a special thing to be able to look at it long term. And as a CEO, when you've been in more short term environments, and you kind of come to a place where you go, wow, this is actually real. We're going to actually be able to build out a long-term strategy.
Right.
It is incredible. It's incredibly liberating.
Well, in 14 years, 3 transactions, man, like I think about that. I'm like, you had to have transaction fatigue at a point, right?
Because you're going from years of due diligence did you go through?
Like you're going from one to the next to the next.
Yeah.
Right.
There's a few road shows involved with that. That's for sure.
Yeah. I mean, if you were leading that, were you on the road?
Yeah, I mean, it's there were varying types of transactions. So they weren't always the same way.
Mm-hmm.
And so, the fact of the matter is it was, I have a responsibility as the CEO to my shareholders.
Right.
That's my number one responsibility. I got to create long-term or short-term shareholder value.
Mm-hmm.
And if the shareholders say, you know what, we're going to sell this business in 3 years and it's your job to get it ready for that, that's my job.
Right.
That's what I'm going to, that's what I do. And I'll make the best decisions I can, to get it there. And you get rewarded for that. So I don't regret any of that. I just, when you take something like this iconic brand that we have here at Leupold, you want to do more with it, right? You want to be able to say, okay, look at where this is 10 years from now. Look at where this is, 12 years from now. So
when there has to be a significant amount of people that would have even applied for that position or put in for that position there would be a certain amount of fear even taking over a brand like Leupold, because you could have a theory, and if that theory is wrong, or if your hypothesis is proven wrong in the market, you can auger in an iconic multi-generation brand in a matter of years if one, they don't choose right, and then two, if you don't make every move. And I would say you've got to be within 90% on those, especially marketing, branding position, right?
Yeah, for sure. I think I came in with luckily a lot of knowledge of the consumer, frankly.
Right.
And that's the first thing that I want to know. Is I want to know what my consumer's eating, sleeping, listening to. I want to know where he's at, what she's doing, and what brands associate, and understanding that consumer intimately is really, really critical. And honestly, we had a lot to fix. I'm not going to, we had a lot of things we had to do to get to where we are now. But you just got to get after it. And there's a lot, I'll always say, there's a lot of things I wish I could have done quicker, but you get going and continue to kind of stay focused on your strategy, stay consistent with your team, and it works,
So let me ask you this. So, we keep these, relatively on the shorter end of the spectrum. So for those listening, what advice would you give them? You got some guy out there that, wants to get into hunting space or, is obsessed with optics or whatever. Like, what advice would you give somebody listening to this podcast right now on how to achieve long-term success?
Well, I think it depends on, one, how do you define long-term success? I think that's the first thing someone has to decide is,
Right.
What do you want? Right. Because, is it, you want to be in this sport and in this area because you're passionate about it and you want to live it and breathe it every day? That could be. Is it that you want the financial return? This industry may not be the best place for financial return right now.
Right.
You got to look at those things first. But what I would say is, man, it depending upon how you're going into it. If you're going into the branded side, you absolutely have to look at the kind of competitive matrix, and is there space there?
Right.
Because I don't want to rain on anyone's parade, but we have an industry that has a lot of small brands in it, a lot.
Yeah.
And it is oversaturated right now, and we're going through a bit of consolidation at the same time. You just saw that with the Bass Pro Cabela's merger, and you're going to continue to see that. And so you better be, if you're going to start a brand, you got to have clear differentiation. You got to be like nailed on your differentiation between what else is out there. The opportunity to buy some brands, there's some good brands that may be an opportunity for someone to get an entrance in there. But the success piece, to answer your question, is, make sure you totally have a very clear strategy. You understand the capital it's going to take to get there, and that you've got the ability to do that.
Right.
And that's the key. And then you got to grind it out, man, because it's never easy. And it's never easy. And then what you find out is you don't get to hunt as much because now you're working all the time. So that's the other reality that most guys get.
Well, one of the things that was shocking to me and it shouldn't shock me, was a couple of years ago when I looked at a lot of the other optics companies, and we won't name them, but all of them, I think, are made outside of the United States, and or most of the parts are made and they're put together in the States.
Assembled.
Is the word they use. What I mean.
Yeah,
assembled in the U.S. Yeah.
There's not even that much of that. To be
really?
honest. I think a few people do a little bit of it to kind of give a persona, but no one does what we do. No one's even close. And I get why. If you guys were, and I'd love to have you up here and tour our factory someday, because when you go through it, I will tell you, when I took the job as CEO and I went through the factory for the first time, and I went through this process, and you got these hundreds of thousands of parts going through the factory, and you got, assembly and clean room, and you're going through this whole thing. And I went through the whole process of making a scope. And I said one thing, I said, I don't know what we're charging, but it can't be enough.
Yeah.
There's no way.
I don't know what we're
really
charging,
hard.
but it can't be enough.
No, I've done the factory tour. What's the Kevin or Rick, I think is his name, the guy that does like the stress testing.
Yeah. Dave
Dave, yeah, Dave's
Archer, yeah.
big hunter. Yeah, Dave's job is to destroy stuff.
Right.
And so he'll literally put something on a rail and rip 10,000 rounds through it and just
Right.
literally abuse the heck out of these things. And then my other favorite thing is scopes that have been returned that were struck by lightning or had a tree fall on them.
Right.
Or, just kind of nutty stuff. And there's a little story.
That is super cool. The scope stories would be in a fantastic blog edition, right?
Yeah.
Because there's so many cool stories to scopes and what happened to them.
Yeah, or dropped one elk hunting, found the rifle 5 years later.
Yeah,
scope still worked,
so
rifle
cool.
was shot. Yeah,
because I
Bottom of
remember.
the river.
No, I found I was on a boat one time in the lower salmon, and we found a rifle on the lower salmon that was 10 feet off the beach on a low river, towards the end of the summer. It had been there for a while, but I was like, man, whatever happened here, I don't know. I'm imagining that they sank a boat upriver, I would imagine, before it and it floated downstream.
No, they've got scopes that have been shot. They've got scopes that have been struck by lightning.
Such a cool blog article, I would imagine. Scope
It'd probably be a good way to empower your customer base too. Get them talking to you. I'd do it. You should do that.
Yeah, it's we've
He'll
got,
have it up in a week.
Yeah. But it's I mean the fact of kind of what we do here. I'll tell you guys a cool story. This was I don't know if it was a year ago, maybe 2 years ago. We got a call from, it was on a Friday, literally, a call from the White House, and it's hey, we want you to come to DC and be the one company representing Oregon as an Oregon manufacturer for the White House for their American Made Day that President Trump had, right?
Yep.
And I'm like, when is it? And they're like, it's Monday. You got to be here Monday, which is here or there. It doesn't surprise me, I guess. But
right.
But it was just and it was awesome. And so we're like, heck yeah, we're going. So we got everything packed up, and I had a board meeting, so I couldn't go. So Shane went, and our VP of manufacturing. And it was a pretty cool thing to be the one company that represented, Oregon. And I'm going, I wonder how they found us. There's other manufacturers. I wonder how it was. And that on the list, Oregon had to be down on the list, right?
Right.
We're not exactly a Republican state.
Right.
So far from it.
Very blue. Very blue.
Yeah.
Definitely not the east. Or definitely not the
Portland.
west, right? It's the east.
Not outside Portland. We need to do it on geography.
Right.
But anyway, but it was pretty funny. And so we finally found out through asking questions and the contact that we had at the White House that it was actually the Secret Service.
Wow.
And I could just see it now, they're just kind of racking their brains to find out who they could get from Oregon, and then there's a Secret Service agent going, Leupold, and that's it.
Yeah.
One word. And so it was a pretty good. It was a pretty cool honor for us to go and do that.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah, because I always think when I think Oregon manufacturing, I think there are three brands that I think of: Leupold, Leatherman, Danner.
Noveski.
I tend not to think of Noveski in Oregon manufacturing, but they are obviously.
I don't either.
I think of those three brands because Leatherman do they still maintain a fairly substantial manufacturing facility up there?
Yeah, it's decent size.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Benchmade's up there too.
Are they?
Benchmade is too. Yeah, they make a great product too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then aren't some of those river companies like the kayaks and wetsuits and stuff?
Oh yeah. I think Kokatat might be in Oregon too, but that's a totally different conversation. We don't need to go into that. But the iconic Oregon,
Right.
And the other thing is I use all three of those brands.
Right.
I tend to wear Danner boots. I always carry a Leatherman when I hunt or do any outdoor activity, and there's some form of leather or there's some form of Leupold optic on something, regardless of what it is.
Right.
Yeah.
Because you have your rangefinder's Leupold for your bow.
I've got scopes and rangefinders, spotting scopes. Pretty much. I made the full transition about.
I don't have anything.
I think
other than
4
Leupold.
years ago. I think I made the full transition.
It's
I just
because of Bruce.
washed everything out.
Yeah, perfect timing. I appreciate that.
Didn't you guys come out with a rangefinder optic or sight for a bow? Is that?
Yeah.
How's that doing?
It's you can only use it in certain states.
We live in Texas.
You can use anything. You guys are good with everything.
Oh yeah, dynamite if you want.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's doing really well. Actually, it's a cool product, and it works. It's guys. It's a lot of guys who have it on and swear by it. So it's we've continued to make that product, and really looked at expanding our observation line as well. We got some great new binos that we're introducing this year that are absolutely phenomenal. Some new spotters that we're doing really well with, and then we continue to.
Yeah, I mean, all the stuff that Lacey shoots for us,
Yeah.
it's all. All the optics. Because I told Shane, I was like, hey, he's like, yeah. So he sent her out a full kit of everything.
Yeah.
We've developed for 2019 is a new red dot sight. We're calling it the Freedom Rts, and it'll be unique to anything on the market because we can actually put a ballistic dial on the top and it'll track. So you could actually have it zeroed at say 50 yards or 100 yards. And you'll be able to dial up to 200, and it'll actually move your dot.
Evan's face just got real serious.
Yeah, I like that.
Super cool.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
Yeah, for predator hunting or whatever you want to use it for, it's you can actually dial distance now, which is a
He's
pretty
like
cool thing.
if so you can't see Evan. Evan's like eyes are like going back to a different time in his life. He was like, that would have been so helpful.
Kentucky windage,
Yeah.
gosh.
That's awesome.
Counting check marks. 1, 2, 3, got it. Yeah, 3, bang. Nope. Should have went 4. Bang. Okay, there we go.
Yeah, that's great. Well, Bruce, listen, man, we really appreciate you coming on. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure chatting with you. You have a really interesting story. It doesn't sound like you've ever made a mistake in your life.
I've made tons.
Doesn't sound like it. But no, man, thank you very much. We really enjoyed chatting with you, and we'd love to get you down here to Texas and get Evan up there to your headquarters, take a look at your place, and get you down here to check us out.
Yeah, and most of the time we ask guys right on the show, I like to have people come back too and give us updates on wins and losses or whatever they might. Things that they think about, because they'll reflect and then they'll come back and say, hey guys, like last year I did this thing. It was super cool and it was a big success. Or I implemented a new ERP and it was a fucking dumpster fire, something like that.
That's about 75% of the time right there. So you can guarantee coming back on that one.
Yeah. So we would love to have you, man. We'll invite you back every year. Seriously, you can come back anytime. It'd be awesome.
Well, I appreciate that, and just congratulations on all your guys' success, and keep it up. We need more companies like you. So
yeah, and then normally we ask people where they can find you, but
everyone
knows how to find Leupold.
If you don't know how to find Leupold, you might be living under a rock.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, I'm Baker Leavitt. This is Evan Hafer. Bruce, thanks for coming on, and you have been listening to Launch Code.